I still get a lot of questions about candies, everything from how to mix them, when to use them, why we use them. So in this video, I hope to answer all of those questions and give you guys a better idea of how to use candies effectively. So we'll go over some of the do's and don'ts, and by the end of this, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what candies can actually do for your artwork. The first thing I want to talk about is mixing the candy, because that process has slightly changed from the previous Candy2o videos that I've produced. If you're new to the channel, I pretty much use Createx products exclusively, so I'll be using Candy2o candies throughout this video. Having said that, all of the information that I'm going to give you, other than the specific mixing ratio as far as Candy2o is concerned and the carrier that we're going to use, all of the other information I'm going to give you will apply to working with any dye-based candy. Doesn't matter whether it's water-based or solvent-based candy. If it's a dye-based candy, all of this information will apply. A dye-based candy is exactly that. It's dye-based. There is absolutely no pigment in a dye-based candy. That's what makes it a true candy. That's what gives it a 100% transparent quality that you cannot get with any pigment-based paint. So the dye-based candy is a concentrate. We need to dilute that with a carrier. For that, I'm going to use the UVLS Clear. Previously, I have always used the 40-30 balancing clear for a carrier when mixing Candy2o. You can still use the 40-30 balancing clear. That's not an issue. But I really prefer using the new UVLS Gloss Clear. And if you're going to use the UVLS for a candy carrier, make sure you use the gloss. You can get this in a matte finish, a gloss finish, and a satin finish. You want the gloss for the Candy2o. So I'm going to mix up some tequila yellow. Createx recommends that you mix this 3-to-1. So 1 part Candy2o to 3 parts UVLS Clear. I'm going to use a medicine cup to get a relatively accurate measurement. Once I've got the candy into the medicine cup, then I can go ahead and add the 3 parts of UVLS Clear. Then I can stir that up just a little bit before I transfer it into a bigger cup, which makes the stirring process a little bit easier. And I still prefer to use the 4011 reducer when I'm using Candy2o. I'm just going to guesstimate a little bit of reducer here. And to be quite honest, the only reason I'm really measuring out this Candy2o at a 3-to-1 ratio is because I'm trying to use what Createx recommends. Ordinarily, I just guesstimate, and I still prefer to use about a 1-to-1 ratio most of the time. So 1 part Candy2o to 1 part UVLS Clear. But you'll stir this up for 1 to 2 minutes just to make sure that it's mixed thoroughly, and then we'll allow it to sit for about 10 minutes before I actually spray it. That just gives the dyes in the candy, the reducer, and the UVLS Clear time to really emulsify and become one product. The UVLS Clear has a higher solids content compared to 40-30 balancing clear, which means it's thicker. So you might want to use a little bit more reducer if you are using the UVLS Clear as the carrier for your Candy2o. So for this demonstration, I decided to paint the Createx Colors logo basically because it's full of colors. I've already done some work off camera just to make this process go a little bit faster. Underneath this one I have a control, which is that logo has been painted with just wicked detail colors. They're solid colors, there's nothing fancy there at all. For the first one that I'm going to paint on camera, I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to paint it completely using candies only. I get the question a lot, can you just use candies to paint all by themselves without using anything else? The answer is yes, you can, but there are pros and cons to that, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So I'm going to begin with Caribe Blue and start spraying this logo. One of the issues I see pretty frequently when people are using candies is they're not fully saturating their colors. On this logo, I barely put any paint on. You can see it's blue, but it's a very pale blue. It's not fully saturated, it's not rich, it's not vibrant, it's not jumping out at you. So on this side, I'm going to paint it the exact same way using nothing but candies. And by the way, the base coat underneath these two are just plain white. There's nothing special about it. On this side, I'm going to fully saturate the colors so you can really see the difference in what candies can do if you use them to their full potential. And it will take quite a few coats because this has been mixed at that 3-to-1 ratio, 1 part Candy2o to 3 parts of the UVLS Clear. Again, I normally like to mix it about 1-to-1, which gives you faster coverage. But using a 3-to-1 mix can be advantageous as well because you don't have to worry about going too dark too quickly. Remember that a true candy will darken with every coat you put down. You're darkening the color. And I'm drying in between with just air. This is Candy2o Deep Purple. Now I've switched to the Candy2o Blood Red. This is the Candy2o Grabber Orange. And finally, the last color is Tequila Yellow. That ate up some time, and there's some other stuff I want to get to in this video, so I went ahead and finished this panel out off camera. But hopefully the differences between these two is clear. On the left side, I sprayed 2 to maybe 3 coats of each candy color, and you can see the candy colors are very muted. They almost appear to be a pastel, whereas on the right side I sprayed enough coats to get full saturation with all of the Candy2o colors that were used on this panel. And full saturation will vary from one color to the next. It depends on how dark or how light the color is. But I sprayed each color with enough coats to get full saturation. And you can really see the difference in the brightness and the vibrancy of the colors on the right side compared to the left. And that's just taking a little bit of extra time to make sure you get to full saturation. So the question, can you airbrush using only candies? You absolutely can. In fact, in part 2 of my airbrushing with Candy2o video, I airbrushed that entire panel using nothing but candies. In this case, I think it's a waste of candy. That's my opinion. Here's why. Again, we've painted this over a plain white base. Everything except for this top right corner is a plain white base coat. There's no pearl, no metallics, nothing of that nature. It's just a solid white base coat. Up here in the left-hand corner is my control. This is just Wicked Detail colors. So I've got Wicked Detail Cerulean Blue, Wicked Detail Violet, Wicked Detail Scarlet, Wicked Detail Orange, and Wicked Detail Yellow. When you compare the control, which again is just plain Wicked Detail colors, there are no candies in this particular logo. But if you compare that to the logo that I did at full saturation using only Candy2o, there's not a lot of difference. The colors are actually a little bit brighter and a little bit more vibrant in just the Wicked Detail colors compared to the candy. Why is that? Keep in mind that candies are 100% transparent, so each subsequent layer of paint you apply is darkening the value of that particular color. In theory, with a true candy, you can apply enough coats of paint to the point that the color will almost appear a black. Now, that's going to depend on the actual color that you're using. Obviously, a yellow, it would take an enormous amount of coats to get the color that dark, and you'll probably never really achieve a true black when you're spraying a candy yellow. On the flip side of that, a candy violet would be very easy to get dark enough to almost appear to be a black with enough layers of paint. So if we go back to this example, the pastel-y looking colors, if you look at the orange and the yellow compared to just the Wicked Detail colors, they are a lot closer in value than the ones that I sprayed the candy at full saturation. And in reality, that's partially my fault. It's difficult to judge value when all of this is already masked off and I've got all these other colors sprayed around it. So in truth, I went a little too dark, probably with the red, the orange, and the yellow in this example. I really like the color of the blue and the violet, but I probably got a little too dark on the warmer colors. So it's up to you how far you want to go as far as saturation, and that can depend on the background or the surrounding area of your painting as well. Another way we can use candies. I said that this is kind of a waste of candy in my opinion because you're not really getting any of the special effects like I talked about in part 2 of my airbrushing with Candy2o videos. But that's more specific to automotive applications or anything that's going to be outside under good sunlight. We can still use candies for other reasons just with general airbrushing. For instance, changing the values of our colors. This example was sprayed initially exactly the same as the control. These are all just Wicked Detail colors, the exact same colors. It's cerulean blue, Wicked Detail violet, Wicked Detail scarlet, Wicked Detail orange, and Wicked Detail yellow. Initially, now you can see the colors are a little bit different compared to this example here because I sprayed candies over all of those Wicked Detail colors, and I put this strip of masking tape down the center so that you could see the difference in colors. And I hope the camera picks this up, but the color is definitely lighter down the center where I had the strip of masking tape. So we can use candies to change the value or darken areas of our airbrush artwork. The same can be said using the Wicked Detail colors, which are essentially transparent. The difference is, let's say you've spent some additional time creating a lot of texture in your underlying paint layers. If you were to come over all of that texture to darken that area, whether it's in shadow or you just want to bump up the contrast, if you came over that with the Wicked Detail colors, which are pigment based, if you apply enough coats of paint over all those underlying layers, the pigment in the paint is going to begin to drown out all of that extra detail. You'll start to lose some of the clarity. The opposite is true of Candy2o. You can put as many coats of candy over those underlying paint layers as you want to get the darkness that you want, whether it's in shadow or you just want to bump up the contrast. Regardless of how many coats of paint you apply using candies, you're going to continue to darken the targeted area, but you're not going to lose the clarity of the detail in the underlying paint layers because, again, there is no pigment in Candy2o. It's 100% transparent. It's dye-based. It's a great way to change the values in your artwork without losing the detail underneath. I hope that makes sense. Another way I like to use candies is as an intensifier. These bottom two examples, both of these sides started exactly like this one, which is all of this was just the Wicked Detail colors, the exact same colors I used in this example mixed heavily with white to create some very pastel colors. I did the same thing on the right side and then I sprayed candy over the pastel colors. So a couple things to point out. Notice the similarity between the blue and the violet in this logo compared to the blue and the violet in this logo. Again, this logo was painted using Candy2o's only. This one is Wicked Detail colors mixed heavily with white to create pastel colors. But if you compare the blue and the violet in these two examples, you can see more what I was talking about. If you don't saturate your candy colors, you get a very pale, muted, almost pastel looking result. This logo was painted exactly like the pastel one to begin with, and then I came over the top of that with Candy2o. And you can see that the results are very similar to this one. So I use candies a lot of times to intensify colors underneath in my artwork. Sometimes I will use a very pastel looking or very muted color to begin a painting if I know I'm going to use candies over the top of it to intensify those colors. And that's a big part of the reason why candies work so well when you're painting true fire. The candy is what intensifies those colors underneath. That's what gives it the pop. That's what gives it that glow. The last two examples on this panel are more oriented toward the custom automotive field, because these are effects that you're not going to see unless you put a clear coat over it, and you're going to see it under good light, like out in the sun. So the first one is, again, the same thing I talked about in part 2 of my airbrushing with candies video. I applied a metallic white base coat underneath this logo before I painted it. So that way, because again, candies are 100% transparent, so when this is clear coated and you get it out in the sunlight, you'll see that all that metallic underneath will reflect through the candies, and you get a really nice shimmer, sparkle effect to the color. For the last one, I used pearls, and other than the orange was actually the sparklescent mango for auto air. The rest of these are all auto air pearl colors, which gives the same effect. I didn't have a metallic background or metallic base coat under this, so this was just a plain white. So I shot a auto air pearlized blue, an auto air pearlized violet, an auto air pearlized red, the auto air sparklescent mango for the orange, and then I actually used auto air pearlized gold in place of the yellow. A similar effect to the metallics using the pearls, but again, you're not going to see this effect until you put a clear coat over the top of it and you have it in good light. Again, I used a strip of masking tape just so that you can see the difference between, because once the pearls were sprayed, I applied a piece of masking tape across the center, and then I sprayed the candies over the pearl essence. So when I remove the tape, you'll see just the pearl essence on their own, and then you can see the difference between the candy sprayed over the pearl essence. I went ahead and threw a couple coats of clear onto this panel just so that you guys could see the effects of the candies over the metallic white base coat and also the candies over the pearlized colors. This is what it looks like with the pearlized colors, and remember, the strip down the center is just the pearlized colors on their own. Everything else has a candy color over those pearlized colors. And this is what the metallic white base coat under the pearls looks like. So I hope that clears up some of the confusion and answers a lot of the questions I get commonly when it comes to incorporating candies into your artwork. Yes, you can absolutely use candies and nothing but candies to create an entire work of art if you want to do that. Me personally, I don't do that unless I'm working in the automotive realm, something that's going to be clear coated outside in the sun, whether it's a vehicle or a helmet, something to that effect, where I can take advantage of a metallic or a pearlized color underneath those candies to really show off the 100% transparent qualities that the candies offer. When it comes to general artwork, again, I think that using candies and nothing but candies is kind of a waste, because you don't get those dynamic lighting effects in a studio environment or a home environment. I do incorporate candies into my general artwork. For example, if I want to change the value of something like I talked about earlier, whether it's something that needs to be darker because it's in shadow or I'm trying to bump up the contrast, I will 100% use candies to do that, especially if there's underlying detail that I want to show through clearly. Candies are perfect for that environment. Another way I use candies in my general artwork is for dynamic lighting effects. If I'm working on something that has dynamic lighting in the background and I want to really have a glow around the subject that I'm painting, candies are spectacular for that. Again, that's why they work so well for true fire and for lightning effects. Dynamic lighting and candies go hand in hand. Another way I use candies is to tint or change the tone of something in a painting or the entire painting. You can use candies to tint, whether you want to tint it more on the warmer side or the cooler side. Candies are great for that. There's a number of ways that I incorporate candies in just my general artwork. And I've run out of time for this video, but I promise that I will follow this up with some actual examples of me using candies in my actual artwork so that you guys can see that, and hopefully that will clear things up even more. I hope you guys have got something out of this. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, and share. I'll leave links in the description below to all the products that I used for this video. That's the Candy2os, the UVLS Clear, the 4011 reducer, and my Iwata HPCS. I'll also leave a link in the description to the Wicked Art Teespring merchandise store. Check it out if you guys want to help support the channel. If you're finding value in the information that I'm sharing with you, feel free to do so and you get something out of the deal as well. And I appreciate it very much. I'm Trevor with Wicked Art Studio, and I will see you guys next time.